So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to put this intro up, and then I'm going to show you a brief, I won't call it a slide, but a brief blackout text of the benefits of parthenocarpy. The parthenocarpy benefits are absolutely factual. There's lots of research out there explaining that. You can Google tomato and parthenocarpy and just read to your heart's content about the benefits of it and what scientists in other nations have been trying to do to get it and that sort of thing. And validate it for yourself. Don't trust anything I'm saying. But I think the explanation of me that's 25 minutes after this part with Rose Cherrybear has a complete background verbal of how it came to start. There's a little bit of passion in there, which I think is helpful to understand what I've been through. And then at the very end after that is just a quick scroll of every year for the past decade of everybody I've talked to and some milestones and stuff like that, and it scrolls by quickly so you can just stop it and read up on it. If you have an interest beyond just looking at this really cool tomato I'm about to show you, then please take advantage of it. Again, the reason why I altered the beginning is because the video is going long, and some of the feedback I've gotten is your videos are too long. And so I want to reduce the videos. That's the ultimate goal. And so I'm going to promise to do that in the future, but this one I want to leave that part where I talk about parthenocarpy, because this subject is the most important thing in my life that is vegetable and garden related. Okay, so it's an obsession. And so the benefits worldwide, not exaggerating, the benefits worldwide are astounding. And so I think it's really important. So here's Rose Cherrybear. This row here is Brandybear up to, supposed to be that row right here. Right here is where the tag is for Rose. That's supposed to be the beginning of Rose, but I had to have planted one in 2-19 by accident when I transplanted them out here. So this one is a very productive. I've got it growing up 2 stems here. It's very productive. It's got ideal foliage. It's not crippled by disease, and the fruit is awesome. And it's a very large cherry, even though it's got a crack in it right here. It's got minimal cracking, and the trusses are self-setting. You don't have to pick any extra fruit off. It just, everything about this Rose Cherrybear 2-19 meets all my expectations. So this is one. Take a look here. I got fruit coming up both sides all the way up, and it's looking fantastic up here. It's got some of the German side of the genes for the very nice foliage for a cherry tomato, and it's a large cherry. So that was 2-19 down there, and this is 2-32R for the right plant. 2-32L and 2-32R, because I've got 2 plants in there. I really need to remove the left one, but it is looking fairly nice to me. It's not cracking. It's got good color and decent fruit set, but it's got some of these bigger fruit that I don't like. It's not consistent, in other words. But the plant right next to it, 2-32R, is fantastic. It's got consistent fruit. Here you can see this is a decent sized truss. Coming up here, I've already harvested some fruit today. You can see some more. And up here, very nice big fruit. Not quite as big as 2-19, but it's very, very nice. And this one has a little better eating quality. but the same type of foliage. So those two are my two go-tos, 2-32R and 2-19. Today is the 14th of October. This is Rose Cherrybear, the next generation, my selection for the next generation. This is plant 2, row 2, plant number 32 container from left to right. These are amounts in grams. These are amounts in ounces. It's nearly 1.5 ounce cherry tomato. It's a large cherry tomato with really good taste. I'll put a picture up that may be a little more clear than this video. And yeah, let's take a look at this. It's a very nice cherry tomato. These aren't perfectly ripe. We've got a freeze coming in, not a freeze, but a frost coming in 2 days. And I've had to pull some of these. Some I pulled a little while ago, and they're a little more ripe, so that's why. So let's cut these open and see what they look like on the inside. I'm hoping to get some seed from some of these. So yeah, I got a piece of blue painter's tape on me. If you don't know, I put blue painter's tape on these cups when I collect the tomatoes. So I put the 2-32 on the cup. Okay, this one's completely seedless. It's always good to confirm the seedless, which I've already done in this particular one. Yay, seed. It makes me really happy. So if I get a mixture of seedless and seeded, that'd be great. It's another seed, so I can save the seed, so I don't have to worry about the freeze getting this one. More seed. Wow, is there going to be any more parthenocarpic ones? I guess we'll see. Now they tend to seed very easily. Cherry tomatoes do. There's another one. So I know it's parthenocarpic. Well, it looks like there may be. No, that's not a seed. Even though it was tiny, it's an ovule. So it's very parthenocarpic. And let me get a taste test on it, and I'll tell you what it tastes like. It's very good. Excuse me. It's a large tomato. It has very little cracking, and I think it's just a wonderful selection to carry forward. This is plant 2-32. It was 2-32 right. I removed left, and we got a freeze coming in tomorrow. So I'm going to take this plant and move it into the grow room. It's got a little grow tip going on here, and I'm gonna let it grow so I can eat me some cherries over the winter, plus validate, since there's no pollinators and no wind, extra validate that it doesn't have any that it's truly parthenocarpic and highly parthenocarpic. So I'm gonna pull that one and put it in the grow room. There it is, sitting in the grow room. It's nice warm in here, definitely protected from the freeze. I've got a squash that I'll talk about later, Feroce next generation, and one of the 3 Brandybears that I moved in here too, so I can enjoy and validate the definitive parthenocarpy. There's no doubt in my mind with this one. I'm quite sure this cherry is as well. And lastly, I saved the seed from those you just saw. So let me just tell you how it began. So in 2012, I retired. I was in civil service in the Air Force at the time, and before that I spent 20 years in the Air Force. I retired out of the Air Force. And so after my stint in civil service of about 8 years, culminating in 30 years of service in the Air Force, things just immediately slowed down. So I had to pick up a hobby, and I've always been a gardener, traditional gardening primarily. It started when I was a kid, and it was sporadic. I mean, it's not like I gardened all the time. We weren't farmers, but we did have, you know, various land at different times, 40 acres between Bonham and Leonard, Texas, which was super enjoyable for me. But anyway, I learned to drive a tractor when I was 12. I was out gardening. I had my hands in it. I was a member of the Future Farmers of America as a kid. I raised show rabbits and chickens, and we had all kinds of animals, even had a horse. And so I've been around it for a long time. My grandparents shared a lot with me. They always had a garden. So I really enjoyed gardening. And so after retirement, it gave me an opportunity to get into it pretty significantly. And so I started getting into it, and I began in traditional gardening in 2012. And then I moved. I was blogging at the time, things that were going on, and I was sharing garden pictures and stuff like that for family and my own documentation. And then I noticed YouTube. So I said, this is a much better format for me to go from blogger to YouTube. And so the initial entrance into YouTube was all about just documenting primarily and sharing with family some too. So while I was on YouTube, I saw something called Global Buckets and then Larry Hall's Gutter Gardening. And so because of that, I became interested in hydroponics. Let me hit the camera. It's trying to fade out on me. So I quickly got into hydroponics, which led to me building a greenhouse. And during that time, right after I built actually the year before I built the greenhouse, I started getting into breeding vegetables, primarily squash and tomato, because I wanted, those are my two favorite crops of all vegetables, but I wanted to have examples that could do better in our heat and my specific location. So I started breeding squash first and then tomato later in the same year. And I found it really kind of interesting. So I created hybrids, and what I wanted to do was pick winners by just growing out the hybrids and then the next generation, and picking winners, if you will. In other words, if they survived our heat and whatever I exposed it to and still managed to do decent, that was what I carried to the next generation. And during that time, I also began learning and researching genetics, because that's important when you become a breeder, and horticulture in general. And I've just began absorbing it like crazy. I mean, I'm newly retired at this time, fairly newly retired, and so I'm absorbing like crazy. Also, MHP Gardener, who's no longer on YouTube, but it's easy to search him. He's still got a channel. But anyway, he became a major influence with me on the possibilities of growing hydroponically. So at the same time I was doing hydroponics, I was doing container gardening and breeding. And so what I did learn from my research was the magic of diversity came in the second generation. And so I'd already selected good quality open pollinated plants that I could cross to create a hybrid. And from that hybrid, there's a potential of new crosses of genes between the two that would create an improvement that would do better in my environment. And from my research, I learned that the magic, again, was in the second generation. So I think it's in the details at the end, but I think it was 2015. 2015 were the hybrids. 2016 was the year that I grew out a lot of the second generation of both cherry tomatoes. I'm going to stick to tomatoes now because that's the point of the video. I did continue with other vegetables, okra and eggplants and melons and watermelons and all that. That all came later. But anyway, so I'm going to stick to tomato now. But I grew, because I was growing hydroponically in a modified Dutch bucket system. I had rows set up in the greenhouse, and I only had 10 containers in each row. And so what I did was to improve the capability, I wanted to stress the plants. So I grew 5 each in the 10 containers. Each row could only hold 10 containers. So I grew 5 cherry tomatoes in one row, another 5 cherry tomatoes from another crossing in another row, another 5 tomatoes per bucket in 10 containers in the next row. So each row gave me 50 containers of second generation plants. And so what happened was I stressed the plants by rolling the greenhouse walls down, which the sun baked the area. And my thoughts were to keep the temperature above 100 for long periods of time, and also reduce the water amount, keeping them alive, but reduce it to a minimum, and at the same time create competition in each container, because each container had 5 plants. And what I learned in my research was the reason why I put 5 in each container wasn't to be successful, it was to pick winners. And so I learned that plants, when they're competing with each other, I don't know if they have root signals or they just realize something's going on. I'm not sure exactly why, but competition can create survivors, can create issues that kill off some plants. And I've seen this over and over, where I try to grow 2 or 3 in one container and one's just really super stunted, but I know if I move it to another container on its own, it just picks up and starts doing well. So I don't know if that's because the roots in the other ones just suck everything up real quick and grow faster. But anyway, competition, high heat, and reduction in watering was my methodology to testing the survivors and getting the next generation. So that's what I did. So it was going okay. You know, none of them were looking that great in the second generation. And we had a vacation coming up in North Carolina. I was new to YouTube, and I had created a greenhouse that I had given away, and I had a raffle, and I was going to go deliver that greenhouse, which I did, to a person in North Carolina who won it. And at the same time, we were going to have a vacation. So we were gone about 2 weeks. And while we were gone, the system that I was growing hydroponically in involved a recirculation system with rain barrels that gravity fed the recirculation chamber. Anyway, it's a long story, and I probably have some videos up on it. That system I ended up calling FAWN, Flowing Area Wicking Nutrient, meaning, you know, the hydroponic fertilizer. But anyway, FAWN is something you can look up if you want to. But what happened was the rain barrels collapsed and the system went dead. The person who was checking on it every few days told me that there was an incident where they collapsed, which essentially stopped all of the watering needs for the plants. And the plants were getting kind of baked, as I told you too. So I asked the person that was looking in on it for us to unplug the electric portions, and we were on our way home at that point, and it was going to be several days. So I knew and it was later in the year. I think this was September, maybe October. I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember specifically the month, but I have a video up on it where I gave away the greenhouse, so you can look that up if you want to. But anyway, so I came back, and it was a disaster. And I was on YouTube, and I was actually filming. I had the video camera to my face, and I was filming it all because I did a precursory look, and I saw it failed. and I was sharing everything at the time, so I was videotaping the disaster. And I was going to put a video up on YouTube. And while I was doing that, I noticed in one row, one bucket, one plant. That was a cherry tomato. Out of all those rows, and 50 in each row, in all those containers, one plant in one bucket looked phenomenally good. I mean, it looked like it wasn't hit at all by any of the stressors. And I don't know why I didn't recognize it before I left. Maybe because, you know, I was just kind of giving glances and quick comparisons and whatnot, but I don't know why I didn't notice that. But when I came back, everything was essentially dying or dead, and it was easy to see as I was going through. It was in the corner of one of the rows at the beginning, I guess. Yeah, the beginning. And so as I was filming it, I noticed it, and not only was it in very pristine condition, just really healthy looking, every single flower on every single truss had a tomato on it. And I'm like, okay, initially I'm thinking, okay, that's fantastic. I've got my next generation. And so what I did was, as they started maturing, I started cutting the fruit to save the seed, because I figured at that time my cherry tomato's done. I've got my cherry tomato and things are going to go great for me year to year. I had no other thoughts other than that. But as I was cutting each tomato, they didn't have seeds. And I'm thinking fruit after fruit after fruit after fruit, and they didn't have any seeds. And so I started researching, why don't they have seeds? If it's either they were fertilized and aborted, but remember I had the greenhouse walls down. So in my system, I had fans going. So that's how things were, I assumed, were getting pollinated for the periods where things were getting pollinated. But these were down and the system was completely off, and it was loaded down with fruit, and there was no seed. So I started researching heavily into it, and I discovered that this plant had to be parthenocarpic. There was no other reason that the tomatoes would form, regular tomatoes would form, full size, full everything, immaculate, everything looked wonderful. They would form without seeds, without being fertilized. And so what I initially did was, it was becoming cold because winter was coming on and I wasn't able to get any seeds. So I moved it into the house, and before I'd moved it into the house, I'd started pollinating the dickens out of it with an electric toothbrush. And so, of course, at that time, pollinating with electric toothbrush, it takes a while for the ovary to grow into a tomato and then see if it had seeds. And so I moved it into the house because it was getting cold, and my intent was to save the seeds and start again the following year. But it got so cold so quick, and the research I had learned was that parthenocarpy was something exceptional. And I had done so much research where people have been trying to get it. They noted it in the 1930s and before, and they were spraying hormones. They determined that hormones was creating parthenocarpy in tomatoes, and farmers have been spraying fields with hormones forever to increase fruit set. And then fast forward, and nations all over the world were trying to get tomato parthenocarpy because it's an ideal specimen for parthenocarpy, and it's the #1 vegetable in the world. And so it was of high degree of interest. I mean, lots of nations, the Netherlands, Israel, Japan, China, us, and Germany, and so many more. They've got scientific paper after scientific paper after scientific paper trying to get it and studying it and all that. And there were several potential parthenocarpic genes called PAT, P-A-T, PAT2, MP1, which was a modification of PAT2, IV something or another, S1LG6, and just there's tons of it. And don't take my word for it. Go search for it. All you gotta do is put in Google Parthenocarpy and tomato. Just do a search and just read to your heart's content, because I did. I looked at all of it. So I realized the point of all of this was what I had was awesome, because everything that I researched, it was bad. It was pretty bad. And OSU, Oregon State University, had the best. And so what I'd done was I said, this is so important in the years coming on, and the end of the year is over, and I can't keep the tomato in the house. Even I haven't collected seed from it, so I built my grow room. That's the bottom line for what I'm saying. And to this day, I've been growing in the grow room every winter with Parthenocarpy. So I did my initial release of my findings in the next year, which was 2016, I grew them out. I managed to save seed, and I grew out this tomato, and I grew out a lot of this tomato, and which eventually became Brent, because it's the first one and I named it after me. So I grew out Brent, a lot of them, and every single plant did exactly the same as that initial plant. They were perfectly parthenocarpic, very hardy, very robust, and they performed in both heat and cold. I started testing it. So anyway, fast forward to 2017, and I started trying to release it and talk to people and all that. And then that's where I had talked to the University of Florida. I can't remember the professor's name, but they had a tomato breeding program. A lot of universities I contacted, but at that time it was the University of Florida. And I talked to their tomato breeder, their top tomato breeder. I think they have a tomato, latest one's called Tasty Lee or something like that. But anyway, a lot of universities coordinate with other people to try to release improvements on tomato through disease resistance and improved flavor and all kinds of stuff. So let me hit the back of the camera again to get it to show up. So anyway, I talked to the guy, and he said Florida's not interested in it. University of Florida's not, which kind of baffled me. Why aren't you interested in something that can improve tomatoes growing in your humidity? But he wasn't. And he said, but he has a friend. That's my neighbor leaving. I'm looking out the window there. But he has a friend, and he's not really interested in cherry tomatoes, but if you can get it in beefsteak size tomatoes, then I think he'd be interested in it. So I'm thinking, okay, new focus. Can I carry the genetics into other tomato lines? And so I'd already considered that, and I'd already started crossing it in 2017. I think it was 2017. It may have been 2016, but in 2016 or 2017, I already started crossing into beefsteaks. And the first one was a open pollinated version of Big Zack. It's where this guy I bought seed from grew these really big tomatoes, and a version that he grew out of Big Zack, I bought seeds from that, and that was my first cross, because what I was trying to do is make the cherry tomatoes huge, or at least in between, so I could get beefsteaks and slicers. And so I crossed that, and then later on I crossed with a lot of other beefsteaks. But anyway, not only did I talk to the University of Florida, I talked to other universities, including my own, I think, at that point, and I talked to seed companies. I think I talked to Johnny's in 2017 to see if they were interested. The history is in the back of the video, like I said. And this is going long, but it is how it all got started. So what the conclusion I came to in 2017 was that I need to prove the genetics. I need to see if the genetics will transfer into other tomatoes, larger tomatoes. So from 2017 to about 2020, I'd also done a video in 2017 where I showed that this stuff was happening. And that's when my paranoia began. You know, are people going to come here and steal it? And so I put cameras up, and the paranoia began, but that added to my stress too. So anyway, I'm growing it in the winter. I decided to pursue transferring the genetics into larger tomatoes to create more appeal and further the work. So from 2017 to 2020, I pulled videos off of YouTube and I focused on growing them into larger tomatoes. The end result is I did. And Brandybear is my signature improvement, my signature tomato and beefsteak. And I've got, I don't know, 20 or 25 other lines of Parthenocarpic ones that weren't great, but Brandybear is great. And I'm growing a next generation of Brandybear this year along with Rose Cherrybear, which brings me back. The history's there. That's the story of the beginning, how it started. And so we're gonna get into Rose Cherrybear. Man, I'm sorry I carried it this long. My intent was to keep it under 10 minutes.